This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Meeting's being recorded. Thank you all for coming. This is a meeting of the Easthampton Finance Committee, City Council Finance Committee. That's it, Omar. We have no minutes. Tom promises minutes for the next meeting. Okay. Do we need to worry about the mayor or not? Well, she's in a meeting. So I have public speak here, but I assume all of you are here for the library. Raise your hand if you're not. When we are done with the presentation, I'm going to open the floor to all of you. Okay. So let's start with the presentation. Who wants to go first, Elizabeth or Chuck?
I'll go first.
He's going to do the PowerPoint for you.
Yes. As you know, I'm Elizabeth Appelquist. I'm the president of the Emily Williston Library Board. And first of all, I just want to thank you for giving us this time to present what we feel is some very important financial information about the library. And it's our hope here that you will then recommend for us to speak in front of the City Council. So first I want to give you some background. We've been looking for a new space for the library for actively for about the last year. And needless to say, we love our present building, but we're spending way too much money on the upkeep and we don't have the ability to expand there as we need to. And so in order to provide the services that our community needs, we just feel that we need to look for a different space. So we became very interested in the property at 52 Main Street. And as you may remember, the Bank of America Bank of America used to be there. And so we discovered it has the capacity to expand and we can renovate in a way that suits our needs with meeting rooms, and we will have ample parking. And honestly, we couldn't ask for a better location. An important point is that Easthampton Savings Bank owns that building, and they have recently stated that they would be willing to donate the building to the library. Now, obviously, this is an extraordinarily generous and exciting offer, but the only way that this is going to work for us is if the city increases their appropriation funding amount. We see some real-world consequences if we continue the present funding arrangement. What will happen is we will cannibalize our endowment and we will have to close the doors to the library within 5 years if this does not change. And believe me, this is not something that we're just throwing arbitrarily out. I'm not saying that's for shock value. We have data that Chuck is going to share that has brought us to this conclusion. And as we say, the numbers don't lie. It's just math, as you'll see. But I want to emphasize that we're looking forward to the opportunity for robust discussions with the city to discover ways that support the library and its future. So with all that being said, I'm going to turn things over to Chuck McCullough. He is the CFO of Williston and a huge advocate for the library. And he's going to share more details on how we came to this conclusion.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm going to turn on the presentation.
Yep. Share entire screen. Click on that. Hit share on the right. And go to your PowerPoint.
Yeah. So thank you. And I'm Chuck McCullough, and I'm from 42 Ashley Circle here in Easthampton. So as well as working at Williston for a very long time now. I would like to touch on 3 areas based on just based on what Elizabeth has said. Facility, first big question we have for Easthampton is, do we want a library? Which I think we all do. It's just So the answer is yes. So what we have to deal with the library are really three components of how this is going to work if we are going to make some of the changes necessary. One is the facility, and we can talk about that briefly. Elizabeth's already outlined some of the, terrific developments that have come up in that regard. Then the second thing we have to look at is the operating budget and what it looks like now, what it will look like if we don't do anything, and the associated endowment, and what it will look like if we don't do anything. And then the opportunity that we have to deal with a new building, which will help budgetarily and a lot of other things operationally as far as the library is concerned. And the third element is really going to have to be that the library is going to have to also do some self-perpetuating fundraising in order to make this really, really work. So what I'd like to do is to touch on first the facility. As Elizabeth mentioned, 52 Main Street, right next to Easthampton Savings Bank, and was the Bank of America building. Easthampton Savings Bank owns that building now. And as she said, through these investigations, it's come to our attention that Easthampton Savings Bank would be willing to donate this building to the library for the purposes of the library. Otherwise, they have other commercial interests to use that building. But in this, given these circumstances, they said this seemed like a great use of the building, and they would be obviously very supportive of it and donating it. The reason why this building is so attractive, it can be easily renovated so it is ADA compliant, which is a big issue for the library right now that we have to think about. And to try to renovate the existing building for those needs would be incredibly difficult. Second, it has sufficient parking, which is a requirement for libraries. And right now, the current library, as you know, given its location, is challenged with parking. And then the renovated space would eliminate the drain on resources that we're dealing with right now in the current operating budget. It's, I would say Katya, the director of the library right now, is as much a physical plant director as she is a librarian. It's really just, remarkable. Great building, beautiful building, but a big but to run it the way it needs to be run, and particularly as a library, it's pretty challenging right now. So as we touched on already, the annual allocation of the city, we're going to have to talk about what that level needs to be in order for this whole financial model to work. These are some of the layouts that we've already done. We're working with Kalo and Beanick, and they're doing some layouts right now of what this could look like if we were to do a renovation to this building. We're trying to do as basic a renovation as possible so we could get in the building if this is going to be a possibility. But there's even more complete renovation drawings that they've created. What it gives us is 8,500 square feet, which is slightly larger than the current building, but more importantly, this is space that you can actually work with. The building the library is in presently, beautiful building again, but given its configuration, it's very hard to use for a lot of what's needed in a current library today, particularly meeting space, things like that are really needs for a 21st century library. This is the current layout. So you can see this is 7,900 square feet, and the next building would be 8,500 square feet. But big buts are we have parking, it can be ADA, it's accessible, and it has room for expansion at some later point. So that's the building. So we have this incredible opportunity in front of us and some of the challenges we're dealing with now that can be remedied with this possible move. So what's the next step? The next step to talk about is budget. And the basic problem is long-term, again, as I've said, do we want a library? And I think the answer to everybody is yes, but how do we do that? Under the current financial model, the library can only sustain itself for about 5 years, 6 years. And as Elizabeth said, it's just math. There's going to be a cannibalization of the endowment under the current circumstances. That's going to mean once that endowment's gone, then it becomes incredibly hard to run the library under the current funding circumstances. The second part is that the current facilities can't be addressed under the existing model. We've already talked about that. The physical plant needs, the improvements that need to be made, just the regular maintenance, very challenging. Possible new location would be a better investment for capital dollars moving forward. If we're going to invest in a building for library purposes, I think this is going to be an important element. The last thing is that staffing and programming have been underfunded. It's just a budget management. You've got to cut back on things and not do things in order to meet the budget needs right now. And I think we're selling the operation and the program that we could be providing to the community short by in this underfunded condition. So I think there's some things that we need to talk about in terms of online services and also salaries and benefits for the employees. So I think that's going to be an important part of any operating budget that we're going to put together. So I'll give you the recommendations, and then we'll just go to the financial model quickly. Different funding model from the city, possibly a larger percentage of the library budget. We're not asking for 100% because the library does have an endowment, but we've got to be very safe. We've got to be thoughtful about how we use that endowment so it's there for the long run. In the meantime, we can use some judicious usage of the library's endowment for a short period of time, be more aggressive as we transition from one funding model from the city to another. So there isn't, and that's all financial modeling that we can get into in some detail. So it means that we have to use a little more endowment as the city's allocation ramps up. That's okay, but we can't do that forever. So we just got to be thoughtful about what's the right amount of overspending on the endowment for a short period of time. The next thing is just program. We just want to make sure that the programs that we are going to be able to offer are going to be in the operating budget moving forward, whether it's online services, as we mentioned, community meeting space. That is something that Katya, the director, is hearing all the time as far as a need is concerned. That's constant with libraries today. So we want to make sure that we're taking advantage of the new space to be able to create some of those additional services. And then the final thing is that we just have to make sure with the other building, with the new building, the accessibility is going to be very important. And then just the operating costs that we're dealing with right now, we would be able to mitigate some of the, whether we like it or not, unnecessary repairs and replacements that we're doing right now to the existing building, just to keep it in good condition and have it be a place that we can bring the public. So those are the recommendations. What I've done is we've also done some research to give everyone a sense of where the funding level is in Easthampton right now versus what it's like statewide. We have every municipality in the state is recorded in this area of funding, percentage funding for the library. And you can see what we did is we took I think it's 269 municipalities in Massachusetts or libraries, and where Easthampton ranked. And the whole list, Easthampton's, whether we like it or not, is down near the bottom right now. I think in so many ways Easthampton is doing so many remarkable things right now. This is just one area where I think we have to just turn our attention to it and see if we can do better in this area. But this gives you an idea of the funding level, percentage of operating budget that is supported by the municipality. And at this point right now, you can see a lot of the other towns in our local area and even the state average, we're lagging considerably behind that. So that's another element that we're going to have to think about. And there's full data on this that we can provide to anybody who would like to see it. So these are some of the assumptions we have embedded into the financial model, and I'll go to that right now. But this is just really things that we're going to have to think about each and every budget year, and this is what's embedded in the operating budget right now. So I'll move off of this slide right now, and I'm going to go back to. I'm going to switch to an Excel spreadsheet so that I can. I'm going to have to share that.
Did you stop sharing?
I did stop sharing that.
So go back to the meeting.
Yeah. I'm going to share again. And
Entire screen.
Yeah.
Now call up your spreadsheet.
So this is the operating budget for the library right now. And this is projected budget. This goes from 2023 out to 2030. Now here's all the revenue that's received by the library right now. This means that the city appropriation as well as money that's drawn from the endowment and a slight supplemental endowment draw that the endowment is supporting some borrowing that we had to do to repair the building. So as you look at some of the operating expenses, and we're making the assumptions that we have to have a fundraiser if we're going to survive, we're going to have a professional fundraiser doing work for so there's assumptions embedded in the operating budget. But right now we're starting to show projected deficits that are going to start escalating over the next number of years. This is, I described to people, we're not building a Cadillac budget here. We're building a nice down the middle Chevrolet budget. This is not anything complicated. But unless we do something that's either going to be improvement to the city funding or improvement in just using more endowment, this is going to be a deficit budget. So I'm going to go to another tab, and let's just see what happens when we just decide to just use the endowment. So if we take the endowment, and I'm just going to move that over into the column that is, apologize, let me go over here. So if we were to take more endowment draw, so this would be just to balance the budget. We go back to the operating budget and look at, we have zeros now. But what we've done is we've put a lot more money into the supplemental endowment draw line. So great, we have a balanced budget, but what has that done to the endowment? You look at the endowment, and the endowment balance right now, as of 2023, is about $2.2 million. What happens to the endowment as we start? Look at where it'll be by 2029. We will have cannibalized that endowment to this extent that $900,000 endowment is not going to offer the coverage in the operating budget that we're going to need moving forward. So let's eliminate that assumption and go back to look at what the endowment is if we don't cannibalize it. It stays right there at about $2.2 million, and we're using about 6% of the endowment. That's still a little high, but that's manageable. It means the endowment is basically staying pat. So using the endowment aggressively is a short-term answer, which causes us to be looking in 5 years to say, what else can we do? And so I don't think that's a solution. The other part would be to just look at the funding level right now of the city. We now showed it was 49%, I think, 2 years ago. It went up to 54% this past year because of some additional funding that was received here from the city. If I take that out, it goes down to about 44%, but right now it's over 50%, over 50%. But under the current conditions of how this funding formula is made, this is the percentage that we're going to see for the endowment over the next few years. It's going to be in the 30s, not the 40s anymore, the 30s. And you saw what the state average are. The state average is in the 80% area. So we have to think about what it's going to look like if we're going to have funding that's going to work for the city library. So I'm going to put that in right now into this model. Oh, I'm going to make sure I get the whole thing there. Yeah. Okay. So the operating budget now is showing zeros across the board. And here's just to balance the budget. Look at the funding level. It's up to 60%, getting to, it'll have to be at about 70%. I'm suggesting that it might have to be a little higher than that if we're also going to do some debt service coverage, which would be required if we're going to do renovations to the library, the new facility. So it's all about us really sitting down and doing a financial model that's going to work for the library, but is going to not cannibalize the endowment. So the endowment's there to serve the needs in perpetuity. But we also have to think about, what else can be done? One of them that I think is going to be very important is that that fundraising position really starts to do some fundraising, and I'll touch on that in a second. So back to the PowerPoint. So said, a lot of these assumptions that I just said are all embedded in that model that you just saw. So the last part is fundraising. So hiring a full-time fundraiser is going to be crucial. This is not something that can be done just by the library board. This is serious fundraising. This is fundraising for an annual fund. This is a fundraising for somebody who knows how to get larger gifts that are going to come in to support and grow the endowment. And the third element is it's going to have to be somebody who could do capital fundraising for projects, for building, for renovations, for improvements. That's all. This is somebody who has got some serious fundraising chops who can make it happen and run a database and do the calls necessary to make that happen. And it's going to be establishing a good formal database. And as I've said, annual fund, capital gifts, and endowment. It's going to be crucial. So just a quick conclusion on this, and then we can field some questions. The city and the library board can work together to create budget viability. I'm showing you a model, but there's city realities, there's library realities. We're gonna have to see if we can meld those together, because we have an incredible opportunity here, an incredibly valuable building basically being handed to us that can meet the needs of the city in a remarkable way and meet the needs of the library. Doing the building design and borrowing the money, that's all things that we can do in the library, being a 501c3. The other thing we have done is we've talked to the MBLC, the Massachusetts Bureau of Library Commission. Okay. And there are some opportunities from some grants, but there's some hoops we have to jump through and some strings attached to those. So it's not without some complications, but we had a rather promising conversation with them too. So there is some opportunity there as well. The other part was we talked with Representative Carey and Senator Vilas, and they have mentioned that they are very supportive of this, and that they are going to work very hard on whatever they can do from a state standpoint to help us with some additional funding. So, the fundraising I think is going to be critically important, but I think between the library board and the municipality, we have this really pretty remarkable opportunity staring us in the face. And we've got to put our heads together and figure out the best way to make this work. As Elizabeth said, it's just math. If we do nothing, I can guarantee you the library is non-existent in 5 years. It's just a financial reality. Just cannot operate the way it is right now. So, but I'm certainly able to take questions.
Stop sharing, okay?
Yeah.
I'd like to turn it over to counselors first, or the mayor. Any counselors have any questions? Nicole?
Yeah, I would just comment, Chuck, Elizabeth, and Katya and I have been talking back and forth on this possibility and support. And one of the things I've said very candidly is to increase the amount of money we give to the library in any given fiscal year is not something I am against at all, right? And with the will of the council. My question is, if you're going to a bank and you have to show them that you're getting this increase, it's a new vote every year.
Mm-hmm.
And I would bring that to the public. So, if we did a schedule of how that increases, 3%, to get to whatever our target is, 70% or whatnot, that's a new vote every year.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't a way to lock that in, because I do the budget, or the mayor then will do the budget, it goes to city council. So, that's one thing, kind of red flag that I've been waving. And we've talked about other ways the city may help, and not as far as I'd like to be down the budget process to have an alternative. I'm not unwilling. I am just worried about long-term, the council and the mayor that is, can be all in support, but the mayor and council that is cannot commit city money for future councils and mayors.
Mhm.
And, you know, there's a change. And so that was this is an amazing opportunity.
Mhm.
I want to be really creative and help it and whatnot. But, you know, I would say to my fellow, you know, our council folks, and those in the public and councilors not here, that this is a commitment. This is a commitment to a vote for at least as long as you're into office. That is nothing more than a good handshake, because there's nothing in writing that can make it happen.
Can I ask a question? Because you alluded to something. Is the bank's offer to donate the facility conditioned on a model of the city's budget increases over the years? Is there a condition there, or do you get it donated and it's your building? I'm just curious, because she alluded to that the bank might want to see numbers, and she can't commit to those because she's not going to be mayor for 10 years. She could be, but you're not going to be.
She's not.
But the point I'm trying to make is the bank putting conditions on this donation?
No, I would say the bank isn't putting conditions on the donate, but I think we all have to, you know, the board as
Yeah.
board members of the library have to make a measured decision on, can we borrow money? Can we make a renovation and borrow money that is, my advice to the board is do as basic in the renovation as you possibly can to get moved in, so that the borrowing is at as low a level as possible to mitigate the risk. And then, but, you know, part of us being able to borrow is going to need to be able to show a financial model that makes sense. So it's not really the bank's donation that's tied to it, but it's our collective thoughts about whether it's a financially viable deal that can be sold to a bank.
Well, and also, I mean, what we're talking about in this increase, you know, of the city contribution doesn't go to capital, it goes to operations, correct? So, I mean, the idea would be, and I think I'll steal it from you, is that the city's commitment yearly and that percent goes up, and then the reliance on the endowment goes down, and that becomes more of leverage for debt to renovate or to improve. So when we're talking about like that, when I'm talking about the percent, I just want to be clear, we're talking about what's in the budget on top of the minimum amount for your operating budget. I don't know. I mean, I guess at some point that's important for a bank or whoever you're dealing with, but in the immediate, it's just like staying afloat while you get into new space. The city is not being asked to fund capital for this project. We're being asked to provide more operational money. Okay. I just want,
And just to comment on what the mayor alluded to with regard to future mayors and future councils, I've been here a long time. We've had recessions in which budgets were slammed and cut badly. And mayors can decide, the mayor has the authority to appropriate a budget. We approve it, we could cut it. I doubt any future council would cut the mayor's budget for the library, but you can't speak to that. But a mayor elected has all the authority to decide where the budget money goes. And sometimes that gets limited, especially if the state cuts back its funding. So you may be coming back with this presentation for a new mayor. And I would suggest that that's going to happen because you're relying on a government to give you money, and governments in this democracy change with the people that run it. So I'm just going to put that out there. I've witnessed budgets cut various departments because of the mayor's priorities, different mayors. So we had 3 of them. Any other things from councilors before I open it to the public?
I just have a question. It's
Connie?
not necessarily about current, right? I understand that. I support the library. I want it to be successful, and I want community members to be able to access it, right? I believe in the purpose of the library. And this may be a question for Dan, but when I look at how much the city has contributed for however many years, has it always been that amount of funding? Did something shift where the city suddenly was contributing less to the library? Was
I'd
there
have
a
to look
much
at the budget.
larger endowment at some point? And I'm just trying to understand the kind of the history of how we kind of got to this.
I think Katya, the library director.
Mhm,
I've been
yeah.
here a year, so there are people who've been here a lot longer than I have, but I can speak a little bit to that, which is that the city has historically agreed to fund essentially the bare state minimum
Uh-huh.
that is required for the library to be certified by the state.
Mhm.
And historically, that's been pretty much for the last many years where the city relationship has been. The library budget has shifted for some various reasons,
Mhm.
including the fact that like much of the city, there's been a deferred maintenance in terms of salary, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
And there has been also certain over in various years, certain supplemental appropriations that have changed that a little bit.
Okay.
But by and large, this isn't a new situation. It's a fairly stable one.
Yeah, because like I said.
The endowment has grown somewhat,
Mhm.
and that's allowed us to make some changes
Mhm.
along the way, including renovating the building and increasing staff salaries to a more state comparable level.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
But by and large, this is not some sudden shock. This is a long-running deferred maintenance situation.
Yeah, because I was just thinking about Dan's or Councilor Chair Risk's comment about the mayor might support it, the city council might not support it, and did we get to a point where that was actually what was happening within the city where funding? So I'm just trying to get a larger
Mhm.
context of, just so
I could have
understand.
verified that that's what it's been.
Yeah.
Katrina, can you state your name for the record?
I'm sorry,
for
my name
Tom?
My name is Katya Shapiro. I'm the library director.
Mhm.
Okay, and you know Elizabeth and you know Chuck. So anybody who speaks from now on, just state
I'm
your
sorry
name for the
about
record.
that,
No, I just
I'm
want,
also an Easthampton resident these days.
that's
So,
fine.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Welcome to
But I know that the budget has been pretty stable that way. There's a state minimum. In fact, a couple of years ago, I don't know, it was last fiscal year, we had to make
Yeah.
a little change because we didn't do it right
Mhm.
mathematically.
Yeah,
Uh, Any other counselors or? Okay, public. I'll take the people in the room, then I'll go online.
I'll be
Gotcha.
very brief. I just want to speak to a few things that have been said. First of all, thank you for hearing us and being part of this discussion. I think the library's goal, both from what I've heard from the board, from what I've heard from work over many years, has been to not necessarily guarantee some specific level of funding, but to bring the library, which is currently a very independent nonprofit, into a closer relationship with the city, and to think of creative funding strategies that can do that and bring the library into something closer to a structured relationship with the city, so that even though budgets grow and they shrink, there's more of an understanding about what kind of future we might be able to plan on. And I think there are some really good models in the area that we can look at for guidance. That's all I would say about that.
Okay, anybody else? Go ahead.
I'm Lori Ingraham. I'm 22 Picard Circle, and I am on the board of the library. And the board this past year did some fundraising. It's the first year that we really tried to do fundraising. We were hoping to raise like 35,000, but we raised 7,500 from some wonderful businesses, but it was really hard for us. It's hard for us as a board to go and ask for money. It was also hard because we truly were asking for operating budget money, and hard to make that sale to the businesses when we weren't doing like a capital drive. So I just wanted to let you know that we've tried, and we are trying, and we will continue to try to do the fundraising ourselves, but that's why we just really need a little more from the city. Thank you.
Okay. Eric?
Hi, Eric Quillen, Precinct 2. Well, I do very much appreciate Mayor LaChapelle and Chairman Rist's cautions about future governments and future elected officials. To me, that does sound a little bit like, well, it's pouring out today, but it's going to be sunny tomorrow, so I'm not going to bring an umbrella with me today. You all are the people who make the decisions in our community currently today. And I can tell you, as someone who's been involved with the library board for about the last 15 years, it's pouring out. And we are really at a critical point where, we really do fundamentally have to ask ourselves what our values are in Easthampton. Mr. McCulloch laid out basically, and Ms. Apkus laid it out that within 5 years, we will not have a library if we go down this current road. I mean, that's something, and I can tell you, I agree that was not said for shock value. That's just the reality that we're in. So I ask you all to think about the responsibility you have as folks in power currently with this situation.
Well, I'll just speak to that as a city councilor, for however much longer I will be a city councilor. I would never vote to cut an appropriation from the mayor for the library. If the mayor decided to give $500,000 more next year, I'd question it, but I would still vote it because the financial team looks at the big picture and what the entire city needs. And I also know that the councils that I've been a part of, and I've been a part of all of them, have never looked at the library as a place to cut. So I just want to put that out there. That's just my particular policy. I totally agree that we need a library and we need it funded. But the city, what I'd like to ask Chuck and Elizabeth, what's the state doing for libraries? What are the grants or anything? Are they small? I saw a revenue picture and you sent me that. I'll share that with everybody. But where are we with the state funding?
You've got
she deals with
a
that
pretty good review.
Happily. We do get a significant portion of state aid every year.
What's that amount?
I don't have the amount. It's in the 20 to 30,000.
20 or 30, that's all?
Yeah, but that's the baseline, and Chuck has it up there. It's basically on a formula in terms of population and.
It's a formula based.
Yeah, it's a formula thing. And we basically qualify for it by doing reporting and ensuring we're open a certain number of hours.
25, 27, Chuck showing. That seems insufficient to me.
And what that is, I mean, yes, MBLC certainly has a legislative agenda to get that raised across the board, but that's not specific to the city or specific to our other levels of funding. That's specific mostly to population and meeting a certain number of qualifications. The only other thing that I would mention about the state grants for construction is for future things is that one of the things that everyone mentioned about those state grants for construction is that one of the key points to qualifying for them is to have full city buy-in, because all that money passes through the city's hands, even if we are, a nonprofit, which in this case we are.
Okay.
But there are other options available. They've funded a lot of initiatives too, and our local consortium also kind of streamlines a lot of our purchasing options for us, and that's a huge financial lift as well.
Okay, Connie, go.
So you had the list of all the cities up there. I think Southampton gave 97%. And are they also considered a nonprofit, or is their structure something different where?
There are about as many variations of this in the state as there are cities. But so there are some cities that have a library that's fully a city department, and that's just what it is.
I see, I got you.
We're closer to libraries like Gloucester and like Forbes and Northampton, where there's a public-private split, basically, that's governed by certain agreements.
Okay.
That's a very important distinction.
That's helpful. And the other question that I had was, you had mentioned Senator Vilas and Representative Carey were also supporting in various ways. Is there anything that we can do as counselors to collaborate with them on whatever it is that they're working on in order to support that? Or is what they're doing related to the grants that you were talking about?
No, they're talking about other funding, like earmark type funding.
Okay.
And so I'm sure there will be ways that we can be supportive of that in the future. I just don't know the exact pathways.
Okay. Yep. No, just
And we've conveyed some, the potential and obviously the great opportunity we have here to them. They're very excited about it. They say, wow, this is something we really have to work on.
Sure.
And so, yes, they're both very excited to see how, the library board, municipality, and their efforts can all work together to see if we can make this happen.
Okay, great.
Okay, I screwed up. I put a rules committee meeting in 20 minutes in the same room. And I didn't realize this was going to be such a big event. So I should have been clairvoyant and understood that, because this is important to a lot of people. So I want everybody to have a moment to speak, if you can keep it brief. Anybody else want to speak to this? Go ahead, name for the record.
Gail Cannon, Ashley Circle, Easthampton, retired librarian from the high school. I want to thank you all so much for seeing the presentation. We so appreciate all the detail within it and the hope and excitement of what's possible in the future. So all of our schools have certified librarians in the city of Easthampton. So all our young population are going to be great readers, have great opportunities. And I just hope, I hope the heartache is sort of expressed here a little bit. But I just hope that we don't lose the library in 5 years, and that we can successfully work together and do great things, because our city is so growing and it's so great. So thank you.
Anybody else in the room? Anybody on? I'm sorry, I didn't see. Go ahead.
Jonathan Schmidt, 442 East Street. I've been providing professional library services to children here in town for the better part of a decade. And I was thinking about what to say, because I feel like we're all on the same page here to a degree. So I'm going to try to be aspirational here at the end, which is to say that, it's not just a matter of, do we want the library to exist? I think we all do, but there's got to be this recognition that we're falling behind in terms of the services that we're providing to our city. The list of other communities, I think, really highlights that. And so in thinking about this potential change in front of us, it's not just, okay, we're gonna keep the library. It's opening new doors and pathways. And the biggest change that I've seen over the past 10 years was the renovation that was done to fix the foundation around the library, and then ultimately change the layout of the youth department to become more functional. And it has simply, changed the way that people interact with the youth department. I talk to folks who work at other libraries and hear about the way people come in and utilize the space, and they stay there and make use of those resources. And yet, all too often we had folks coming in and grabbing a couple things and leaving, because it wasn't a comfortable space for them to be in. The youth department now is, to a degree, and yet we are still, bursting at the seams when we really bring out the turnout that we're looking for. And I'll sort of wrap up by saying I was reading recently and thinking a lot about this loss of the third place for our society, a source of community outside of work and the home, and or a place for social opportunities. And I had the privilege of running a program the other day where I had upwards of 35, I think close to 40 folks in the library, kind of based around this thing that we were doing. And I was thrilled to see that the connections that the parents were making with each other and the way that the kids were interacting with each other. And yet the space was dominated by what was happening. And our regular services, still to a degree, had to be limited. People couldn't access the shelving in the same way, and there was just too many people around as a part of this program to then continue to use the library. And so if we want to do all of these different things, we need a space that's going to be conducive to that. And I'd really like to see us move in a direction where we can have multiple things going on, and we don't just have to shift all of our attention to the thing in the moment that is deemed kind of most important. And so I hope that we can continue the conversation, and I appreciate the presentation that was put together on it, and I look forward to seeing what else comes of this. Thanks.
Okay, anybody online? Use the raise hand. Doris, go ahead.
She literally raised her hand.
Turn your mic on, Doris.
Hi, my name is Doris Madsen. I live at Night Avenue in Easthampton. Getting an echo here on my computer, so it's a little annoying. But I was part of a very extensive publicly appointed committee in the 1990s, before any of you were involved in city government or doing what you're doing at this.
Doris,
What?
we are getting every other word. I don't know if it's your internet connection or your microphone, but we can't hear.
You can stay close to the computer.
Stay right next to the computer. Maybe that'll help.
Okay, can you hear now?
A little better.
I've never used this format, so
No, you just muted
can you
your
hear
mic.
me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, go ahead.
I was part of a publicly appointed committee in the 1990s before Easthampton was a city. The Board of Selectmen appointed a committee. We did an extensive, intensive report. We knew this was coming. We wanted a whole new
What should I do here, Omar?
library. Yes, Easthampton needs a quality library. We're a community that deserves it. We need it. We need everything anybody here said. But we also need a public process. I know the Library Association and the Executive Board is working on this. But it's extremely important. I think it should be public in all ways that every other department in the city public. It pains me to say this to you all who are working so hard. But I feel deeply if the city is going to commit more money, it has to be a public process.
Doris, I'm gonna, because I got most of that. I'm gonna ask you and anybody else who wanted to speak this evening, I've got to cut this off because we have 15 minutes and I have another agenda item. Please email your thoughts to President Gomez, who will distribute them to the council. His email is hgomez@easthamptonma.gov. All of you, if you have opinions on this matter, email them also to the mayor. But I'm going to have to cut you off. I heard a lot of that, but I wasn't sure because I think it's your internet. It's not your use of your computer. It's just breaking up. So I ask you to please send that. And I'll pass it along to Elizabeth and to Chuck as well. Okay? But thank you all. I'm sorry I have to cut this a little shorter. I wasn't expecting this, and I guess I should have.
Just real quick,
Yes, Tom.
I believe that their request was to address the full council at some point.
Up to the president.
Should we, yeah, we should probably speak, but I think we can probably facilitate that. I don't know exactly when, but that should be fine, probably, right? Doing that.
And we'll sit down with the chairman and figure it out.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
We'll sit down with the chairman and we'll figure it out.
Okay.
One of the things you should know is we're in the budget season now. And we're a little behind in what we usually have done in the fall, and that's free cash disbursement to catch up on some operating budget needs. So that's going to take up a lot of our time. So I would suggest to the president that we get through that, because that means a lot of public hearings at council and everything. But your presentation was heard by the one person that needs to hear it, and that's the mayor and us. There's 5 of us here, so it's good. Thank you.
But just let us know if there's if we need to attend another meeting, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to end this.
Thank you.
Just leave the call.
Yes, just.
So counselors,
Just leave the call.
Yeah.
Hadel, Jessica, and counselors, I've got about 5 minutes, and obviously that's not enough time to talk about free cash and stabilization. I sent a lot of information, study it. I did not set a public hearing for this, and I assume we're gonna get more stuff. The next meeting, expect to take a lot of time. The next meeting will be the 2 hours probably, because we're probably gonna get more appropriations to deal with. And we have to deal with the stabilization accounts, okay? Rather than get into it, because we have less than 10 minutes now before the next meeting has to start. I just as soon start that discussion at the next meeting, which is January 25th. I'm sorry, Hadel, you spent your time here, or you needed to hear the library presentation. It's okay. And all of you, but I don't want to get into the thoughts that I had on stabilization accounts until we have more time. So I apologize for scheduling a rules meeting, but Connie and I are on the same committee and I thought it'd be convenient, but I didn't realize the library presentation would take up all the time, so. Okay. Okay, January 25th, we'll talk about all this, all right? May I have a motion to conclude the meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion to adjourn, all in favor? Aye.
Oh, that's another, for the rules meeting, it's another link?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Okay.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.